Hello to everyone coming into the room. Good morning to those that are just joining us. And even more lively morning to those that are already on their 7th cup of coffee this morning. That is myself included. Just whilst we let everyone come into the room, be really great for people just to use our normal etiquette of just introducing themselves on the chat, advising as to what institution you're from, what your role is and what your name is. That would be great. Let's have some nice friendly morning chitter chatter between us. Yeah, loads and loads of great sessions on today. You've made a good choice in coming to this one. Some say the host with the most, others say you've just come for Vince and for BUCS, which is absolutely fair. Just highlighting some other great sessions that are happening today. We've got Ben Page from Ipsos Mori, who's the Chief Exec of Ipsos Mori. So if you want to know about predicting the future and anything around that, then that's coming up. There's loads and loads of other great sessions, something from Sarah Curtin, some great sessions from Nick Smith and Kat Sullivan. So plenty for people to get involved in. Let's just see. Hi Tish from Worcester, and hi Adam from Christchurch. Rob Adam from Coventry, not that I'm biased, but hello. Great stuff. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, that would be wonderful. Just give it a couple more minutes and then we'll get going. Birmingham City, BUCS New. 2 more from Coventry. Great stuff. So I think we're going to get going. So it's with great pleasure that I can introduce Vince, who's the Chief Exec at BUCS, and talking all things sport and all things student opportunities and activities, but specifically with a focus around active participation. I will hand over to Vince. As always, if you can please use the chat to raise any kind of problems or issues, and use the Q&A for questions. We'll take those at the end. Great stuff. I'll hand over to Vince and have a great session.
Thanks, Matt. So good morning. Thank you for having me. Thank you for coming to listen. What I'm going to do is run through some sort of basic introduction to BUCS, tell you a little bit about who we are, what we do, just to make sure everyone's aware of sort of the range of that, what the benefits are of BUCS and what we're trying to do, how we're bringing some new activities into term 1 because of the challenges presented to us by COVID. And so how we will sort of maintain and extend our level of service to you as members and to the students that you deal with. So obviously looking to enable you to recruit students through Freshers Fair into your sports clubs, to enable that team bonding to take place, and also preparing for the league season in term 2. We'll also demonstrate some of the research evidence and the consultation that this response that we created is founded on. It'll be fairly swift, about 20 minutes, and then 20 minutes or so for questions at the end. So any questions in the chat function, that would be great. And if you want to any further information, if you want to receive that, if you let us know your details or just go straight to the BUCS webpage and register on My BUCS, you can get more regular information from us. To start, I guess it's worth putting it into some context. And there's a great quote which says, "Things turn out best for the people who make the best of how things turn out." So we have no choice in terms of the situation confronting us due to COVID. We have a choice then of how we respond to that, and that's absolutely within our gift. So in part, COVID provided us with an opportunity to reset the compass of HE sport and seek to make it perhaps better, but hopefully a little bit different to what it was previously. So in terms of some of the basics of BUCS, we're the governing body for HE sport in the UK, so similar to the FA for football or the RFU for rugby. The major difference is we deal with about 53 different national governing bodies, and trying to get them all in a line to tell us what's happening is a little bit challenging at the best of times, in present circumstances even more so. We're a charity with a trading arm. We represent about 174 member institutions, which range in size massively, from some universities with very few students to universities that enter over 100 teams into our competition structure on a normal year, and also the diversity of students within that. And what we do is deliver a calendar of sporting and sort of educational or CPD events across a year. Our mission is to provide the best university sport experience in the world. Not a small challenge, but in some areas I think we probably are already there, and certainly leading in the European field of some of the stuff that we do. So focusing in on our strategy has been in place for the last 4 years. We're coming to the end of that and looking to rebuild the strategy as we move forward. And COVID, again, provides us with an opportunity to look at what might be different and better. We have 4 columns or pillars of our strategy. The first one is around physical activity and health. Second is around social and recreational sport, or what you might call intramural sport. Then we have the inter-university competition, which is something we're probably most well known for. That's the Wednesday afternoon BUCS sport competition. And Rob, I know, is the basketball coach for Coventry, gets quite excited on a Wednesday afternoon when he talks very kindly and politely to the referees that that facilitate his game. And at the top end, we talk about performance sport. And performance for us deals with the type of athlete who's a sports scholar, perhaps in your institution, or who represent GB students at international level at the World University Games or World University Championships. We then have 3 cost-cutting strands. Inclusion is one, and then profile and influence, and finally professional and workforce development. And my focus for today will be around the physical activity and health bit and the social and recreational sport piece. So that's where we're going to try and provide some focus. But before we get to that, just a brief background into the sport and events bit of BUCS. So we are, like I say, the NGB, we have 170 members. On our BUCS Play app, we have over 140,000 users and around 90,000 athletes who participate and compete within the BUCS programs. That was up to March this year. Obviously, that was curtailed slightly because we lost a lot of events and sports post-lockdown. So we're probably in the maybe 95 to 100,000 competitor mark. We have 850 leagues, over 6,000 teams, 40,000 fixtures, and we run 200 event days across a year. So that might be a single day event like archery, or maybe a 3-day event. So for example, we run the largest surfing event in Europe down in Cornwall. We provide the largest student regatta in Europe for our rowers at Home Pierpoint. And our cross-country event that was held this year or last season in Edinburgh had over 2,000 competitors. And people like the Brownlee brothers who've run in our cross-country event, and others, really setting a benchmark that is quite enviable for many. So quite a lot going on in the sports world. But if we then focus on the physical activity and well-being bit, we want to start with some evidence. So what does the evidence tell us? And we have 2 sets of data that's most critical in some respects. We've just recently launched the 2nd iteration of the BAS, British Active Student Survey. And during lockdown, we also conducted the BUCS Student Survey to give us a bit more understanding about what students were going through right now. So we also then have alongside that government announcements, which are perhaps not providing the clarity as much as we would have hoped, and may well be raising expectations. Coming out and saying that sport will return is perhaps not quite true, because sport may return. But as many of you will know, facilities are still perhaps locked down because of furlough of staff, or they can't afford to reopen. And there's a lot of reasons that NGBs haven't yet got their return to play at grassroots level, certainly not finalised. Cricket are pretty much out there and playing some sport now, but cricket is pretty much socially distanced at the best of times anyway. So what are we trying to get from the evidence is to look at what's really happening within our student population, understand who they are, what they want, and what they want us to do for them, and then work with NGBs and others to look at how we provide for that. So, like I said, the government language hasn't been that helpful. Swimming, rugby, football are quite well advanced, but still haven't got those absolutely nailed down. Other NGBs are working hard on their framework to return, but we think maybe October might be the earliest that some of that will come to fruition. So in terms of the BAS survey, who took part? Well, we know we've got a mixture of sort of biographical data. There's a skew towards people from less deprived backgrounds, but what drives that and what should and can we do to try and address this? Similarly, there's representation within the sexual orientation of the users of the survey, and what should we do to provide or promote accessibility and inclusion. If we look at what they did and how active they are, students generally are pretty active, and most completing the survey played BUCS sport or both BUCS and intramural sport, and some of that's backed up by the student survey we did ourselves. Critically, within the BAS survey, though, there's some data that we're trying to now put into place with our return to play work. So barriers to activity. One of the main barriers that this group within the BAS survey said was this a bit of an emphasis on concern around study time. So exams and too much or too busy with studies was a real barrier, but less so for inactive people. There's issues around body confidence, what activity options, the cost of things being perhaps a bit too expensive and so on. So we're starting to see some evidence around what the barriers are and how we can address those barriers. If you look at personal well-being, this is where BAS really starts to come to the fore. So we know, for example, that students who are more active have a higher life satisfaction, feel more worthwhile, and are happier, but critically are less anxious. The scale on anxiety is a reverse scale, so the lower the score, the better. So students who are more active and they either use the gym or play sport are likely to be happier, have more mental resilience, better mental well-being, etc. And that's the second time we've run that survey, and the evidence is strong on both iterations of it around those personal well-being pieces. Again, if you want to access that, the full survey will be available via the BUCS website. Within the BUCS student survey, we looked at a range of variables within that. And what we can see from this is that team sports dominate. The majority of people completing the survey were involved in team sports rather than individual. But also activity is lower during lockdown compared with the results that we received from BAS. So this survey took place during lockdown, BAS took place last year. So there is a drop off in activity level within this survey than there was compared to BAS, but that's only because of lockdown. Again, in terms of barriers to participation, the biggest barrier from this population, which was selected from the BUCS Play users, was the access to facilities. That there isn't that access to facilities. Please excuse my house phone ringing in the background. There isn't that access to facilities that students might like to see. The workload or exam pressure finishes quite a long way down in third place for those more active students. So again, quite a telling barrier or difference between BAS and the student survey we carried out. Interestingly, there's a lot of activity tracking taking place. And especially amongst the people competing in individual sports, they like to know what they're doing. And within that, Strava is perhaps the most dominant methodology for them recording or tracking their data. But it's very popular across the piece. So that tracking is something, again, we're looking at. And then we had our own Get BUCS Active, which is a platform for sharing video content for exercise classes. So you could go on there and find a yoga class or a HIIT class or whatever, a core class, and you could do it either live alongside the person, or you can do it at a time to suit yourself post-event. So within that, we asked the question, what could we do, what could we provide that would make more or most impact for you? And the biggest thing that the students wanted within this was information about how to return to train or return to play. So we've been working with national governing bodies now. We hosted a session with over 50 of the NGBs and their chief execs and senior leadership teams to understand how we can work together with them. And that was one of the things we pitched. Could they provide us with some of that return to train, return to play type of video clips that we can then share with our students? And we're looking at how we do that and trying to get that in place right now. So based on that information, what are we doing? One of the things we have coming out very soon is a Coach Parker qualification. This is working in conjunction with an organisation called Our Parks. So Our Parks uses local park facilities for residents, probably in inner city London where it started, to do activity that's free at the point of access to that person. So funding is gained from local authorities, that the coaches are trained up and then deliver sessions. We want the same sort of methodology. It will be an online qualification that will give students the ability to lead outdoor activity sessions using parks or urban spaces on or around their campus. So it could be volunteer based and therefore free to deliver. So very low cost for students to take part. And it's using those, it's outdoor, which is better from a COVID perspective, but also it can be using facilities that are just there on your doorstep. It doesn't have to be specific gym equipment. We're looking at the development of a campus run, very similar to the park run concept, but a bit more flexible maybe in that distances might vary dependent on the facility space or routes you have available around your campuses. And again, this could be tracked using wearable tech. So again, giving students what they want and what they're already using, but in a different format. For some of you who may not be aware, we have the Universal Gym Scheme. So if you're a student at the University of Bristol, but your home is in Nottingham, if you go home during the summer or at vacation times or whatever, you could use the University of Nottingham facilities free of charge if you have a full gym membership at Bristol. And that's now replicated across 100 sites across the UK. So pretty much wherever you travel, you'll be able to find a university gym that you can access. So we think that's about keeping students active, again, at very low cost, and showing the benefit of the sector working together to deliver that activity for students. I've talked about Get BUCS Active, and that platform is there. So please have a look. And if there's stuff you enjoy with that, dive right in and get active, but also use it to promote activity for your own students, because currently it's still free to access and universities are putting their own footage of classes on there. We're also reviewing our digital systems to look at how we create activity tracking and reward points. So for example, if somebody walks to campus and it takes them 30 minutes, they might pick up 20 reward points for that. Working with your student unions, with the university catering facilities and so on, you might be able to create a reward system that based on 200 points, they could get a free cup of coffee or access to gym kit or university hoodies, whatever. So there's a reward and recognition system in place that we're looking to create through BUCS Play alongside that existing app. So what can you do? I guess my first plea would be to work with your sports department. If you haven't made contact with the director of sport or the head of sport within your institution, I would strongly advise you do that, because they may well be doing stuff in this area already and you don't want to duplicate, but there's real strength in actually working together to deliver common goals, which is about getting more students to be more active more often. I guess raise the awareness of the benefits of physical activity with the student union executive, with your student union leadership team and the university leadership team, and also maybe critically with the university welfare services. Counselling is a quite costly activity, but actually a lot of the students that counsellors see, it can be relatively low level issues around anxiety, being away from home, relationship problems, etc. That fear of social isolation. Sport and physical activity can be a solution to some of those fairly low level counselling issues. So it takes the burden away from counselling services. You can help us by promoting the Coach Parker qualification and set up some activity sessions. And again, look to work with your sports department to see what facilities or support they can offer you. And also look at the potential for a campus run. And can it be done just for your institution? Could you share it with a neighbouring university and so on? And how you can use tracking to help promote that, and maybe some reward systems within that too. So there's a lot you can do in that area around physical activity already that we think will be very helpful, and we will support that and obviously provide you with that digital access where we can. Looking at the BUCS social and recreational sport piece, we're already building on very strong foundations. So we know there's a lot of activity already going on in this space, and we're not trying to come and take it over. It's how can we add some value to it? We know, for example, that recruitment at sports fairs is a concern for many. So what is it that is going to provide that challenge? What can provide the solution to students coming in October and saying, well, why should I join now if there's no BUCS sport till January? Well, actually, there's a lot going on, and how can we help you to promote that club activity in term one? And I'll come on to that in a second. Just as a bit of a teaser, what's the literal translation of the Latin intramural? If you put it in the chat function, the first person to get that answer in there will send a BUCS water bottle. I can hear the whoops as I say that, but just as a little teaser, what does that intramural actually mean? I want the literal translation from the Latin. So we know a lot of students from our survey, they want to play competitive sport when they go back to university or when they go to university. That can't happen till January. So there is a challenge there for us to try and overcome with you. We know about that strong tradition of intramural sport. We want to build on it and create an extended offer. So it's a little bit like the People's FA Cup that we're talking about. So can we put in some small-sided games that might help to provide the competition piece that students want, but done with no travel or limited travel and very limited facility costs. So it's got to be really cost effective, because we know that's a challenge for everybody right now. So what are we doing about that social recreational sport bit? Well, obviously looking to provide a digital solution. So we already have a provider of digital solutions called Playways. They do BUCS Play, but they also do a lot of our fixture software for us as well. We're looking at how we may be able to roll that out, and potentially free of charge to institutions, to enable you to register your players and provide your own intramural fixture lists and so on. So we're working with that at the moment, and working with Sport England to see if we can use some funding to promote that, just to get more people into that intramural activity. We also have something called the Archon Combine, or the BUCS Archon Combine. For many of you who are aware of American football, they use a combine to help promote the draft system. So players come out with a score from the combine. What we're looking at here is putting some of your BUCS teams into smaller teams. So if you looked at a men's and a women's hockey team, you perhaps mix them up, teams of 6. We would create an 8 movement pattern challenge that they would need to undertake. So within your university, you might do the first round of that by the end of October and do a second round by the end of November. You then create a university winner for Coventry University or Warwick University or whoever. They would go forward then to perhaps a regional competition, so the West Midlands or East Midlands, and you would then compete against those other institutions, still based on your campus. You're not traveling to compete in term 1. So costs are very low, and the activity participation would be very low. You would then get a regional winner, and we press pause at that point because we move into term 2. The clubs would then be hopefully well bonded. They know first, second and third years and who plays for sort of 1s, 2s and 3s, etc., because they would have been working and training together. They go into the league season, play the league season. At the end of that, just after Easter, we look at potentially doing then a national final where the region or nation, so because obviously Scotland, Ireland and Wales represent nations, would come to a national final. And if it was an in-person national final, we'd look at how that worked, but we could still do that virtually. So it's about physical activity or fitness. It's not necessarily just about sport. So anyone could enter it. It could be a gym-based team, could be a hall of residence team. Anyone could enter it, but it's about trying to help you provide something that's an immediate competitive action for your students to take part in. Similarly, then I talked about the People's FA Cup, using that local, regional, national competition framework for intramural sport. So again, we'd star it, so you couldn't have 6 first-team players playing in a 6-a-side hockey. You'd have to have maximum of two first-team players and so on. They would go through a local heat within your university, and that could be available across the team sports like hockey, football, rugby, sort of 7s or 9s, whatever it may be, netball, basketball, etc. Basketball could be 3-on-3. They go through your university challenge, through a regional challenge as before, and onwards from there. So we're looking at, again, how we provide competitive sport, but at a safe level. So not necessarily 11 aside, 15 aside, whatever. We're working with NGBs to see if we can get that small-sided game in place fairly quickly. We're also looking at some individual sports and looking at what we call connected or virtual competitions. So things like cycling, running and rowing. We know there are platforms already through Concept 2, through Strava, through Zwift, for people to compete in races in virtual but real-time virtual. So for those of you who haven't seen Zwift, it's an app. You can use cycling or running on there. You have to have certain technology within your bike. So you have to have obviously a heart rate monitor, but also a bike that can register your power output. It then puts you into a race environment, and you can race against anyone across the country or across the world even. So we're looking at how we can provide that connected activity for students that would be denied them, that competition would be denied given lockdown at the moment and given the restrictions that COVID might place in term 1. Perhaps more softly, we're also looking at a webinar in the coming weeks as to how Freshers' Fair can be put on in a safe COVID assessed environment. So Directors of Sport have the Senior Managers Network, and we're working with the students to create Student Advisory Group. And we might do something that's a joint event where we look at those freshers fairs and say, well, how can these be delivered properly? It's about sharing best practice, sharing good ideas. And so you can go away with 3 or 4 good points to see how you could deliver freshers fair within your particular institution. So what can you do about social rec sport? Contribute your ideas and thoughts, so help us to shape the content. Really do encourage you to get involved in what you can offer to it. You have a range of great ideas, we know that, so bring them to us and let us see if we can help create something a bit different. Provide support to your sports clubs around expectation management and messaging. What we have found is a lot of students are expecting to return in September, October, and it all be back to normal. That will not be the case, certainly not at an institutional level where lectures, etc., will mix between virtual and in-person teaching. There will be a lot of social distancing on campus. There may be access denied to campus for 2nd and 3rd years, etc. So sport won't be any different. Sport will be delivered in a different way. Partly on the competition bit, it will only be delivered later. You'll actually get the same number of fixtures in your league competition as you would have done in years gone by. It's just all going to be delivered in term 2. So yes, it's going to be tight, and yes, it's going to be a bit challenging to do, but we've got to try and make the best of it and provide that competition where we can for you and your students. So that's what we're going to seek to do. But we do have to manage expectation and say this isn't going to be the same. There is going to be some challenge around it, and it is going to be a difficult, sort of an exceptional year. But we'll help you manage that as well as much as we can. I guess promote the recruitment of players and training opportunities for your club officers. So we should try to get as many students registered with your clubs as is possible. I think there's a lot of good research evidence coming out, and we'll be publishing a value and impact statement in August that looks at things like accelerated friendships. So sport provides a much better and quicker environment for students that are new to university to make friends. They therefore feel part of the institution, they're less likely to leave, so their retention rates are higher and so on. So there's a real benefit to recruiting those students into clubs early on to enable them to stay and feel part of the institution. Helps with their mental well-being, helps with a number of different factors with their own personal well-being. So we really should try and help promote that. Do engage with our Welcome to BUCS seminar. If you're a new SAB particularly, we'll be running that in September, and we want to make sure you're as fully aware as possible of what the opportunities are. And we want to give you sort of a much more detailed view of what BUCS is and what we can do to help you and what your role as a student sabbatical officer might be within that framework. So just to summarize, I guess, through term 1, our focus will be in terms of trying to increase the resource and the support for intramural sport or local sport where we can. Look at virtual or connected sports and see what we can offer in that competition piece. Look at using physical activity programs like the Coach Parker scheme, like the Combine scheme to promote physical activity as a methodology for making a student feel part of the institution. Looking at return to train content and how we can work with NGBs or create that ourselves, or using the strength and conditioning specialist within the higher education institutes already. And we've made contact with one of those networks to see if they will support us, and that they're very happy to look at that. And there will be BUCS events taking place in term 1 where they are safe to do so, where there's demand for it to happen, and also where it's feasible for us to put that on. So we're looking at the event calendar. We want to try to put stuff on if we can, but we are conscious primarily of the safety of students in terms of travel or travel restrictions and their health generally around COVID. So in terms of the intended timeline, this isn't set in stone, and we are trying to remain flexible and agile to provide the services that students and our members want and that are safe and, as I said, in demand and feasible for us to put on. So in terms of that timeline, obviously in term 1, we've got institution-led competitions or intramural sport, virtual and connected sports, physical activity programs, plus the competition for pre-season prep. There will be some BUCS events if we can get them on. As we move into term 2, the league program will commence in January, and then we'll look at the BUCS event competitions continuing through term 2 as much as possible to normal. But normal is going to become a slightly difficult word to judge as we move through this season. But we want to provide a sense of normality where we can. In term 3, we'll still run the BUCS events competition piece, and we'll look again at whether there is that opportunity for intramural sport to be provided in those national finals, if that's at all possible. So I would encourage you to become involved and be part of resetting that compass for higher education sport in this year. And go back to what I said at the start. Let's look to make the best of what we've got, because that's what we've got, and we have a choice about how we respond to it. If we respond positively, I think we can make something good out of the year. We've created a framework, hopefully, that you can get stuck into, but we welcome your input into that. So just to finish, thank you for joining the session and giving me your attention, and then happily take any questions or comments that people have.
Great stuff. Thank you, Vince. Very, very enlightening presentation for myself, certainly. Don't know how others feel. I'll just ask people if they have any questions. Certainly a challenging time for all. No questions. Oh, one question. Great stuff. So one from Tish at Worcester, I believe. Will you be trying to fit the normal amount of league games that you usually have across the semesters into semester 2 and 3?
In a short answer, yes. So we'll focus on term 2. We've had probably clear guidance in the consultation we've done from our members, from directors of sport, that term 1 is for league fixtures pretty much out of the question. And term 3, they have concerns around students and exams and coursework deadlines and so on. So we'll actually look to focus it into term 2. So in a normal season, Trish, you probably get 10 fixtures, and we're looking at probably delivering 10 fixtures within 11 weeks. The difference is in normal circumstances, you'd have 10 fixtures probably spread across 14 or 15 weeks, because we put in slip dates for bad weather and anything like that, where we need to provide just a little bit of flexibility. It is going to be tight. What I would say, if you're finding Wednesday and Wednesday afternoon is a major problem for whatever reason, because academic teaching has shifted, because they've taken sports hall space away or whatever, Wednesday is the preferred afternoon for BUCS sport to take place. It does not have to be on Wednesday afternoon. So if you can get agreement from your opposition to play on a Friday evening or on a Monday evening or whatever, that's absolutely fine for you to do so. So if you're finding you've got a backlog because it's absolutely lashed down with rain one week, and you need to put 2 fixtures on and you shift it to a Monday and a Friday the following week, that's fine. If you can cope with that and your team are happy to play in that, we're happy to try and be as flexible as possible to allow the competition to take place. What you will not find within BUCS, which happens in some organisations, there is no sport prevention unit. We do not want to stop sport happening. We want to encourage sport to happen. So we'll try as much as we can to get fixtures on rather than prevent them from taking place.
Great stuff.
Just while we're waiting for any more questions to come in, Matt, it looks like Joanna Deinhardt, within the walls, spot on. So if you can email me your contact details, Joanna, we'll send you a water bottle as soon as we can.
Great stuff. God, prizes being given out. How good is this for a Thursday morning? Aidan from Leeds has just asked, please can you circulate contact for the senior managers network described? I may have missed it, but could Vince outline something on how BUCS are working with others on the health agenda, NUS, with people like NUS, Ameshi, and Student Minds, etc.?
Yeah, happy to try and do that. So we have our own inclusion board that works on a number of different areas. One of those is around mental well-being. The group is chaired by a guy called Filippo Antoniazzi, who was director of sport at Robert Gordon. I think he's now director of student experience or something similar. The mental health group is chaired by Ian, who I've forgotten his surname. Terrible. Ian was chief executive of the British Athletes Commission that dealt with all the athlete welfare and athlete duty of care stuff that Dame Tanni Gray-Thompson led. So Ian leads that group. So we have links with Student Minds. I know Jenny's spent some time recently trying to rekindle that relationship with Student Minds. We've done stuff with them in the past, and we're trying to move that forward. NUS, obviously, we're here. We've been good partners with NUS for a long time. Obviously, NUS have been through quite a significant amount of change. So we're trying to, again, rebuild some of that work. With Amoshi, we have a link through their deputy chair, I think, who is at University of Stirling. And we've looked at them coming to present to our senior managers network. And we're doing similar work by going and presenting to the Amoshi network. And it's on a broader agenda, not just around health, but that is one of the key things. If you looked at our strategy, Aidan, prior to probably 4 years ago, the strategy was very much based as it wasn't a single leg stool, but it was, bless you, Matt, pretty close. So the Wednesday afternoon competition was what we were famous for, and what we're really, really good at. We were not shy of that either. But what we want to make sure is that we have more than one leg to the stool. So the physical activity piece came in, and we've worked on that over the last few years. I think in this year, a lot more institutions will be looking at that physical activity, mental well-being piece. And so we're strongly sort of set up to deal with that, and hopefully we can then take that forward and work with those other groups like Amoshi and so on. Hopefully that answers your question, but if not, Aidan, again, drop me an email and we can pick that up away from this if you wish.
Great stuff. Two other questions. One is, due to the tight timeline for BUCS fixtures next term, will we see a change in cancelling fixtures, walkovers, etc.? Could be a challenge to play contact sport twice a week. I suppose it's more of a comment, but I don't know whether you got anything to add on that, Vince.
Not really. I guess that's referring to our guidelines and our sort of governance within that. I think we always try to be sympathetic. I know it may not feel like it, and sometimes we do have to put the hammer down and say, no, that's just not acceptable. We can't agree to everything that everyone wants. I think in this coming year, we will look to be sympathetic, but as with all sport, you have to have rules. So if there's a strong reason to not give a walkover for whatever reason, yeah, we would look to support that and be sympathetic. But we have to sort of stick to some level of competition rules, otherwise it could be just chaos. So yeah, we'll be sympathetic, but we can't just throw everything out. Great.
And then just one final one. I know that it must be a challenge dealing with all the governing bodies for all the multiple kind of portfolio of sport that is out there, really. But there's a question here about when sport NGBs release their return to play guidance, will BUCS be able to provide an update when this is released?
Yeah, what we did, we hosted that workshop with the NGBs, and we asked if there was the potential to publish some joint guidelines at a basic level. So for facility providers, what that might look like, because access to changing, access to the facility, it's a one-way access, one-way exit type of thing, limited numbers in gyms and so on. So we're looking at whether we can provide a basic level of guidance at that level that is across sport, because you don't want to go to 53 different sports to get those guidelines. We're seeing if we can try and push that through now. On our website, we do have a page which has the different guidelines as they come available. Like I said, we're monitoring it constantly. We're in touch with sort of biggest sports as much as we can. As it becomes available, we will put stuff up, and we will be able to direct people to their guidelines if we can't produce something that's a bit more generic. Similarly, with risk assessments for student clubs, we're looking whether NGBs can provide us with that simple generic risk assessment. So whichever club officer picks it up can run a basic risk assessment based on COVID to look at their sport or their club and see, are they COVID compliant?
Great stuff. And I suppose this is a bit of an elephant in the room. Have you had much resistance on institutions having to pay the BUCS affiliation 2021 fees with a reduced offer?
I guess what I'd come back on that, Dan, and say, what's the reduced offer? Because you're getting the same number of fixtures, and actually really then looking at putting more into the service in term one. I fully accept it's not the same offer in terms of it's not delivered across 2 terms, it's delivered in second term, but we think there's a sufficient offer there other than the competition piece, but the competition piece is as the same as it was always, that we think the affiliation is still of value to members. So we've had a couple, and it is only a couple that have come back to us on that. So we've answered most of those queries. I think we've had one chief exec of a students' union have a good conversation with me, and I think went away reasonably happy with our answer. We've spoken to the chief execs of all student unions that were available this week, and we picked up the London chief execs a couple of weeks back. And again, I think we've managed to sort of allay some of their fears about this perception of reduced offer. It really isn't a reduced offer, it's just a different offer because of the circumstances we're faced with. So we're doing as much as we can around competition, but we are adding extra services in. And I think once we get some of it nailed down, Dan, you'll really see just how much of an offer there will be. And things like the technological solutions, the digital solutions will make a difference to organizations and how they can track, monitor, and get good data back from their students. You know, a lot of the stuff that BUCS does is not competition. Competition is probably now about a third of what we do, whereas previously it was about 80% of what we did. So I think we've shifted the dial a bit. And as I said, I think physical activity, mental well-being is going to be one of the key areas of focus for institutions this year. And therefore it should be something that we are focusing on as well.
Great stuff. Thank you, Vince. Just give it a couple more. Oh, the questions keep rolling in. Oh, it's just a thank you.
You're welcome, Dan.
Great stuff. Anyone else got any more comments, questions, thoughts?
Or great ideas. You know, by all means, share ideas with us. Quite happy to
that. For many, I'm sure budgets are up in the air at the moment. Will there be a flexible way of paying affiliation fees and team entries?
Affiliation fees, I'm afraid not. Obviously, we run a business that needs cash flow, and we need to make sure we know with some degree of certainty what our budget is, but we're in exactly the same situation as every students' union currently. We're not going to know that until August at the earliest, when people start paying their affiliation fees. So we've had no one, it was about a week ago was the deadline for universities to withdraw from BUCS, and we've had no one withdraw. So no one has said that they formally will not pay their affiliation fee. But we won't know with absolute certainty until they start actually paying the invoices. So that won't be till August. So affiliation fee, no, because that is pretty much the lifeblood of what BUCS survives on and what we need to deliver. On the entry fees, we've already started entry fee processing, and I think, and Jenny might jump in at this point, I think we have 3 gateways for people to enter their teams, the last of which is in October. But Jenny's probably going to put me straight on that as well. So you have a longer period of time to enter your teams. So once you know what your budget is in September, October, whenever, you can then look at your team entries and flex those accordingly. We are profiling there probably will be a downturn in team entries, but because of the financial challenges universities are facing. So we expect that, and we need to budget to make our own cuts to sort of address that and make our own savings to address it, which we're doing. But until we know what our budget is, we don't know what action we may need to take. So we're a slightly chicken and egg scenario, the same as you. Until you know what your budget is, you can't do your entries and so on. So there is more flex on entry fee, and Jenny's worked really hard with her team to reduce that cost as much as possible. So we look to make that as affordable as we can. The affiliation has to stay as it is, and unfortunately we are then, it sounds a bit sort of soft, we're guided by our Articles of Association, which require us to send that information out in advance, etc. So at AGM last year we had to say what the level of affiliation would be, and we cannot vary that unless we go to an AGM to vary it, unfortunately.
Okay, just probably about another 3 minutes if people have any other thoughts or questions.
Just for Joanna, with your water bottle, I'm going to find it really hard to email a water bottle to you. So we do it offline. Don't give us your postal details now, but we'll need a postal address to get that to you.
That's great. I've got her email address. So
yeah. I'll email her mine or copy into it so then she can provide me the postal details.
Yeah. It's a shame we can't attach water bottles to emails, but there we go. Great stuff. There's no suggestion of an emergency general meeting or anything for BUCS at the moment?
No. And we've been through the board, and there's no perception that there's anything required within that. interestingly, we've had some regional meetings take place, and where we were profiling drop-in team entries, we've had a whole bunch of universities say they're entering exactly the same number of teams as last year. So it's thrown some of our scenario planning slightly out the window. We're not going to change it at this stage because we're not sure that's going to be common across the piece. The difficulty is it's so varied, Matt. We have institutions that enter 2 athletes, actually 2 individual people into an athletics competition, and then we say we have a university with over 100, I think it's over 110 teams. So the variation in size is enormous, and trying to chart a route that says we'll deal with all of those, it's almost impossible. It's a normal bell curve distribution for those academics amongst us, that we can try and focus on the centerpiece of that bell graph, but at the extremes of it, we're always going to find people that it won't work for. That's unfortunate, but we have to try and deal, it's an exceptional year. We've got to try and deal with the majority, and where we can soften the blow, if you like, at the edges, we'll do that as much as we can.
Okay, that's great. Okay, well, if there are no further questions, it's just, I'm sure I'll speak on behalf of all the attendees that thanking you, Vince and Jenny, for your session today and also your session yesterday. Thanks ever so much for taking the time to just, inform members and people that have a responsibility for sport and active kind of participation across many of our institutions. So thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And just finally, loads of great sessions on today. Hopefully you make the most of it. I have to say, having heard Ben Page speak from Ipsos Mori, that's definitely one for anyone that is interested in seeing the future. Anyway, I will end this call. I hope you have a great day, and thanks ever so much for everyone for joining us today. Cool. Couple of people. Thanks ever so much, Vince and Jenny, for that.
No problem.
No problem.
Seemed to go well.
Hopefully. Yeah, the affiliations one was always going to come out at some point. It is what it is. We can't make it any worse or any better in some respects.
No, I think your statement's a fair one. It's just hard for everyone, isn't it? And yeah, it's like all these situations for universities having the cut, then that's going to affect student unions, that affects all the affiliate organizations that they work with. It's going to be an endless problem, isn't it? But
it's interesting. Triple S, which is the Scottish student sport, they have offered a discount to their members.
Right.
And bizarrely, we provide some funding to Triple S, and then all this, I say a handful of Scottish members are saying, aren't BUCS going to provide a discount? And that's the common thing we've had from 2 other universities. So we've only had about 8 universities really create that sort of, are you going to provide us with a discount? We dug through our affiliations. 22% of our members pay less than £1,000.
Yeah.
So if we gave them a 50% discount, which is quite extreme, they'd get £500 back.
Yeah.
Is that going to make a massive difference to an organisation? Because if it is, they've got far bigger worries than BUCS entries. And at the top end, for those institutions with the 110 teams, whatever, it's about, about 10 grand. So, and again, of an institution of that size, if they've got that number of teams, they're a big, big institution. 10 grand ain't going to make hiding a difference on their financial situation. 50% discount for us, we lose £600,000.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah.
Which is, that's us pretty much mothballing for a year at that point, because we just wouldn't have the resource to do very much at all. It would be very focused in certain areas, primarily where we've got external funding, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a tough one.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I don't know whether you jotted down Joanna's details.
I can see it there. I'll if I can
just copy
it across,
and then you can get in touch.
Yeah. Brilliant.
I thought you were going to get a harder time there from more chief execs saying, why are we paying our affiliation fee? But I felt you got off relatively lightly.
Well, I say we've spoken to a lot of the chief execs, either individually or on groups. So we did the London region.
Yeah.
It was about 2 weeks ago, Jenny.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we did the session on Tuesday with the rest of them. And yeah, there were some sharp questions there, but you know, I think we addressed it in exactly the same way. That is our lifeblood. We need that resource to come in.
Yeah.
But we think we are offering good value for money. You know, there isn't a diminution in service. It's in term 2, not in 1 and 2.
Yeah,
it's a perceptual thing rather than a reality, I guess.
Yeah.
We just need to prove the reality to them.
Yeah, like all these things, the same situations are the same for everyone. So, you know, the way the students view the student union, the way the students union view, you know, their kind of their, I don't know, their organising bodies above them, or their institution. It's all the same, and it's all the same rhetoric that gets passed up and down. So,
and that's the unfortunate bit. There is what's that phrase, that a lie can run around the world before the truth's got his shoes on. You know, not saying there's deliberate misleading, but there's some myths that get created, and all of a sudden it's the truth, and everyone knows it, and it's like, well, that's not quite where we're at, to be honest. So
yeah, good stuff.
Well, thank you for that.
No problems, and it'll be good to talk a bit more about other things, but
cross that. Is it next week sometime? We're chatting City of Culture.
Friday, I think. Yeah, something like that. So I'll speak to you both soon.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much. Cheers.
Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye bye.